going on in the city so that we know on this side what's really going on. We need a transparent government, and you're part of it. One thing I do want to point out is that I'm the carpetbagger on your list. My residence is listed as Elphinstone. I live there, but I do have property, and my family home is in Gibsons on Franklin Road. So I pay taxes just as much as you do. In fact, probably living there a little more. We moved to Gibsons in 2001, so we've been here about 21 years, my family. My entire family is here. They followed us over. And as a matter of fact, they're here tonight supporting us. So thank you very much. My background is in the broadcasting business. I built the local radio station, CKAY-FM, applied for a license, and we were fortunate enough in getting it. Also worked as faculty at Capilano University and put together the now infamous and famous television broadcasting program and movie program. Please vote, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bob. Not much point in sitting down. We'll get into the questions for tonight. We'll start with the housing topic. First question will go to Mr. Leslie Thompson. Leslie, in what ways will you advocate for affordable housing in our community? And you will have 90 seconds to respond.
Thanks, Keith. Okay, so yesterday we attended a housing seminar for affordable housing, and there was a lot of information that came out of it. Most importantly, that Gibsons is not that bad as the rest of the Sunshine Coast. Our figures with supportive housing is about 31.4 to 15.7 core housing that is required. So it's important to know that we're not right now currently that bad with housing. Yes, within the next 2 to 3 years, we have an emergency. So before we get to that stage, let's try and work with it. Now, we're all talking about a housing problem that we're having, affordable housing, but that at the same time, the current council is putting in a B&B restrictions and the policies that have come in. So let's relook at that and allow people to, that it brings bread and butter to their table to help them pay taxes and everything else. Let's relook at that. And I can give you assurance that I'll be responsible for trying to make that, improve that so that everybody else benefits from it. That opens up the housing. Assets that the town of Gibsons holds, let's try and lease it. Let's get modular housing on leased properties that's around in the town of Gibsons. We are one of the only places on the Sunshine Coast that has property that we can play with. I'm against selling property to a developer, but if we can rent it out to them, get an income, that will help us with the taxes. Thank you. Thanks, Keith.
So Silas has asked to have this question directed to him as well. So Silas, you'll have 90 seconds on the same question. I'll re-ask. In what ways will you advocate for affordable housing in our community?
I'm running for mayor to focus on the housing that we need. We need rentals for our workforce. We need far more options for seniors who are losing their housing or looking to downsize. And we need more affordable rentals for families. I have heard in this campaign a desire to want a more affluent community, which I don't understand because we don't need to become another West Vancouver. We're going too far in that direction already, and we need to turn the tide on that. Even though we know we need more housing options, our current processes are stacked against it. They make it cumbersome and expensive to build multifamily housing, while the option of building a monster home is relatively easy. Trying to rezone for more affordable housing within the OCP is made so difficult that most developers in town studiously avoid it. When we make it easy to buy high-end housing, or to build high-end housing, that's what we're going to get. With my experience in local government and policy, I'm confident we can turn this around. We can update the official community plan, the zoning bylaw, and other processes to encourage the housing we need to preserve our small town character, our small town economy, and our population.
Thank you, Silas. So Anne-Marie and Desmond have both elected to answer this question as well. So Anne-Marie, to you first. In what ways will you advocate for affordable housing in our community?
Thank you very much. This council approved the Town of Gibson housing strategy. We endorsed that, and there's a lot of actions here, and among them, the top ones, which I think is crucial to start before even we update the OCP, is to develop a land strategy. Because what we need to know, we support density, but we need to support density in the right place. But more than that, support the density that can support water security. So what I fear now is perhaps even with the current density we have right now, we may have passed the 10,000. I'm not sure. This is something Gibson's Council must understand, this mandate. But what we need to prioritize is affordable housing, workforce housing, rental, and ownership, right? Provide mechanism, inclusionary zoning, rental zoning. That's what we need to focus. So, among other policies and things that go along, but to me, this is the crucial thing. We need to do a land strategy before even we update the OCP. Otherwise, we're going to update the OCP, and we don't know what's going to happen. Thank you.
Desmond, in what ways will you advocate for affordable housing in our community?
Okay, so affordable housing stated by the federal government is 30% of your income being spent on rent. So basically the number one thing is to lower all other costs so that people have the money to spend the money on rent. Basically, there's 5,000 people in this community. 95% can afford to pay their bills if they own their homes, and 80% if they rent them. So really it's an income issue. It's not a matter of building more housing. An example is right now there's around about 115 units of rental housing in application sitting on the planning department's desk in Gibsons. These will be built over the next 3 years. Basically, they're all market rental. The Sunshine Coast Housing Association is market rental. So all these market rental houses, depending on the income, most of them will be over 30%, but they will be housing. People can afford them. So we don't want to confuse affordability with building new housing units. Building new housing units right now, when construction costs have never been more expensive in the history of this planet as of today, and then to say that by building these new expensive units we'll solve affordability, I'm sorry, the math doesn't work. It's a money issue, it's an income issue. Pay people more money and they can afford it.
Great, thank you. We'll continue in the housing vein. Question number 2, we'll go to Mr. Silas White. Silas, if elected, what will you do, if any, to the recently passed residential guest accommodations bylaw? And 90 seconds from when you start talking.
So I support legalization and regulation of short-term rentals. I have for a number of years, ever since Councillor Lumley and I passed a motion for council to look at that. And unfortunately, we should have started on this path much more incrementally those several years ago, and we would have had some data on the impacts right now. Unfortunately, the process has been hung up by indecision and by a lack of any data. And if we did have the data, we could be exploring alternative ways to also encourage more long-term rentals, which is completely crucial. Instead, that bylaw was delayed by indecision, and now everything is being thrown at the wall at once. I definitely support the immediate restriction on STRs where the owner does not live on the property, on the same property. This is a path many other communities have followed. But at present, I'm not persuaded by the town's data or the current council's discussions that it's feasible to phase out STRs in 2 years, nor do I think that temporary use permitting is the most practical way to legalize STRs. I do support that the town staff is dutifully moving ahead with what the bylaw the council's already passed, but I do think we can still review that and make a more balanced approach once we hear from town residents in this campaign as well.
Thank you very much. So in the interest of full disclosure, Mr. Greg Sohan was next on the list. He is not here because of technical difficulties, so I've erased him off the list, as well as the question I had assigned to him, and we'll just continue on. The next question will go to Mr. Bob Morris. Bob, what do you think is a rent? What do you think is a rent that's reasonable on the Sunshine in Gibsons, and what is a reasonable house price in our community?
Thank you. What is a reasonable rent? I don't know. I really wish I did. The kinds of rents that are being charged on the Sunshine Coast right now, quite frankly, are horrendous, but so are the rents everywhere else. I think there's a tendency for people to try and pocket as much money as they possibly can when we're renting properties, and there's not much you can do about that. How much should a house cost? I suppose what anybody will pay for it. The property values, as you know, have skyrocketed in the last little while, and that doesn't make it easy for anyone, including my family, to purchase a home. I don't know, to be perfectly honest with you, what will happen. Let's hope that property values, being a property owner, I'm not sure I should be saying this, but will probably drop and make it a little easier for people to buy, families to buy in the future. Thank you. The yellow light's on, so. You know.
You can talk to the red if you like. Leslie has asked to answer this question as well. So what do you think is a reasonable rent, and what is a reasonable house price in our community?
Thanks, Keith. So thanks, Bob, for coming up with the answer to that. But I think, it's important because it looks at different aspects of renting a house for anybody, especially as a landlord. They've got bills to pay. It's not like we are here to set a figure. I think $1,200 to $1,600 is a good figure for rent, but a lot of people can't afford that. Again, it depends on, does it provide internet? Is the place got a view? Facilities added? Those are things that everybody needs to keep in mind. At the end of the day, it is the landlords that own the property. They've got maintenance to look after. They've got bills to pay. And that is very, very important about renting accommodation on the coast. It's also important that we look after the younger generation who want to buy houses out here. Let's come up with some incentives from the bank that will allow them to make it possible. Right now there is no incentives, both from the town of Gibsons or the different banks around, local banks in the area, for example, the credit union. Let's look outside the big box and the big picture and work together. So where can we make it affordable for them so they can buy property and live in it? And that's pretty much my point of view on allowing people to either rent or buy property, making it affordable. Thank you.
What's the average price, or what should be the price? What do you think a reasonable rent and reasonable house price is in our?
I think a number of people have sort of alluded to it. It's what can you afford? And one of the big things that, and I will say, I did property management in this community for 5 years. And at that time, we probably were looking after in excess of 400 rental units in the South Coast. And those were the days where a single mom with 2 kids could rent an apartment for $625 a month with heat and hydro included. So those days are gone. The reality is supply. There isn't a huge supply of rental. Mr. Delaney mentioned the number of units coming online, but most of them are market. Some of them are aimed, the Affordable Housing Society is working to bring 40 units online, but it's supply. Most commercial developers will not build rental because they can't get their money out fast enough. So we have to become creative, partnering with community groups, finding financing through BC Housing and CMHC to provide workforce housing, housing for our caregivers, housing for first responders. We're losing these people in the community, and that we can't afford.
Thank you, David. So we'll be moving on to one more question on this topic. Anne-Marie, what is the municipality's role when dealing with houselessness and people living rough? People living rough. It's just a term for homelessness.
That's a tough question. We understand that both federal government and provincial government dropped the ball, and we almost take full responsibility. But I think Gibson supportive housing, even though it was quite contentious, was a good thing for the community, right? We're still figuring out how to get really people from Gibsons, from our community, but slowly we get there. I think I'm really focused on this land use planning because we can zone appropriately, and then, as Councillor Crow mentioned, try to develop, actually go even after more funding. And we are, as a coast, as regional governments, we all together advocating for more funding, liaison with senior levels of government. But obviously, we can still try to do, like, even with private sector as well. It is challenging, but it is possible. But I think if we get a focus on having an area, in, especially Upper Gibsons, focus on the rental housing and focusing on this structure that people can buy their homes over time. And it is challenging, but it has been done in other countries, right? So I think that's the direction. Homeless, obviously, we need to continue. This is a bigger problem, right? Because it's income and is associated with mental illness, and my time is gone. I wish we had 3 minutes.
There's too many candidates. No. All right, so we will be moving on now. That was housing. We'll be closing that and moving on to economic vitality. Phil Young, you'll get the first question for this. Do you support buying local at every opportunity?
We should buy locally. I changed my plan to print my old stuff for the campaign. I buy it locally. I just order, all my campaign stuff locally in the shop, Everybody have to do that. If you are within the town of Gibsons, try your best, do it locally. However, when you have to do other purchasing, that's need, to other area, there's no choice. In order to make people buy locally, we have to establish the system of business, a full service or different types of business should be within our handy distance. In that case, we have to discuss furthermore in the council what to do to buy locally. Thank you. Thank you.
Next question will go to Mr. Blake McLeod. Blake, how do you balance the needs of tourism and the future of this community?
One does research for these sorts of events, and I learned today what a lot of people probably already know is where the Sunshine Coast got its name. And it started in 1914, I think, in Roberts Creek. And it was picked up right away as a way of attracting summer visitors to the coast. So visitors to the coast is not a new thing, and an awful lot of industry has grown up around it. This is the Chamber of Commerce, where we should be talking a little more about business and industry, out of respect for our hosts. So yeah, tourism is vital, but we're also facing in this community what I refer to as the commodification of the Sunshine Coast. And again, it's been going on for a long time. And it ebbs and flows, and each generation of person responds to it in a different way. And as a council, I think it's important to acknowledge the response from the community to change, but also to guide and steward the choices, the decisions, and spend a lot of time engaging with the community and listening and to the concerns and responding with facts, responding with statistics. We have a lot of, crime statistics come out regularly, once a week. We know what our growth is 1% a year. It seems like we have all this change around us, and it seems that if we maybe could convince a few tourists not to come and love the place and buy homes here, but the same thing is those same people for 100 years have been buying and starting businesses and raising their kids and having fun.
Thank you, Blake. There's always got to be one. All right. The next question will go to Anne-Marie. Will the Gibsons District Chamber of Commerce get representation from the town of Gibsons in their meetings as SCRD provides?
I think it's a wonderful idea if it's not happening. I understand that councillors usually talk to the people from the chamber. They participate in meetings. I know Mayor Beamish, for example, he was very active. So in this way, we receive the newsletters. So as responsible councillors, we read and we understand what they are promoting. And I think one of the things is tourism, for example. I think it's important to have representation. But as a councillor, I'm always open to hear whatever request from anybody, from any perspective. It doesn't matter. One of the roles of the chamber is promote, obviously, community economic development, and tourism is a big part. And one thing that I want to highlight, tourism is a wonderful industry, but it can be a very detrimental one. So striking the balance is crucial, because tourism causes exactly this displacement, right? Because suddenly people come here and they want to buy. I mean, there is some sort of housing, people migrating from Vancouver, which is another impact in our community. So this is just to say that it's a delicate balance, and we need to look at what is possible, our policies, land use planning, our OCP. But obviously, input is always welcome. I support. I'm not sure. There's a lot of liaison that we have, liaison roles, but not aware with the chamber.
Thank you. Next question goes to Mr. David Kroll. In your term, what have you done for increasing economic vitality of the town of Gibsons?
Thank you, Keith. The economic vitality of the town, and I think it's been hit upon in a number of these questions that have been asked, the balance between tourism and local residents, providing services for tourism. The big thing, I just came back from UBCM, and every single community on the coast, the first thing they hit upon as what needs to happen in their community is housing. I mentioned earlier, we're losing paramedics, we're losing firemen, we're losing first responders, we're losing caregivers, we're losing mental health workers who can't live in the community, and we're counting on these people to support us. So we're dealing with a row of dominoes, and the first one we have to deal with is housing. We've dealt with some of our most vulnerable with the supportive housing, which has helped immensely. I've personally been working with a couple of property owners in this community to redevelop their properties to provide housing for workforce, caregivers, first responders. One project is potentially 74 units, another is over 80. And the zoning is in place on one of them, the other, so there are things that, but it starts with the first domino that we have to fix. You can't pick up the row of dominoes in the middle and say, how are we going to fix it? So I'm going to say housing, 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 and it has to be to support, as Silas mentioned earlier, the people that need it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next question is to Desmond. Does Gibsons need does Gibsons need more larger places of employment to take some of the dependence on tourism away?
It already does. There is construction projects that require workforce labour in 100, 120 people. That all that labour has to be imported to the coast. The actual labour on the coast right now in the construction industry is booked for the next several years. Tourist accommodation, which is the number one driver. Sunshine Coast has, in the 2016 census, had two industries, forestry and tourism. So the tourism sector here is the restaurants, it's the tourist accommodation business with the 90 people who provide short-term rentals or their home-based tourism accommodation. The restaurants depend on that, the stores, the local markets, the farmers markets. So, we are creating something that is really unique and special and creating employment for all the people that live in this town through tourism. And it's really one of the greenest occupations or industries we can have. Construction is something that we need to survive. We need to have new hospitals, new buildings, everything else. That sector, it needs to be accommodated in motels and everywhere else to build our way out of what is perceived as a lack of housing. But that will put extra strains, obviously, on the community. But we have really strong industry already.
Thank you, Desmond. That concludes the economic vitality segment of the debate tonight. We'll be moving on now to infrastructure. First question to you, Mr. Leslie Thompson. Climate change is a problem we will be dealing with more and more. What can be done in regards to building sustainably with climate change in mind?
Thanks, Keith. So, as we all know, climate change is becoming more of an issue, but I don't think all of us sitting out here and the people that are on Facebook and Zoom are responsible individuals for climate change. It's a bigger issue that's happening around the world. However, having said that, it is up to us how we do little things that will help climate change minimize. We are not going to completely see it go away. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But there are little things that you can do as an individual at home. For example, sealing the windows and making sure that an audit on the energy level of the house is done, and making sure we move into an electrical mobile car services over the years. I know California has come up with a law in the next couple of years to deal with that. I see more and more of our customers in the community that are now riding electrical bikes, which is a good thing that will help climate change. Keeping that in mind, the infrastructure needs to be worked on. We have a problem with water. We have, I'm a good example, our business itself has been without water for 2 months now. We've got neighbors that are helping us out. Our asset of the aquifer is important. Let's not touch it. Let's not spoil it. That's an asset. And it's something that we really need to look after. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks.
Anne-Marie has chosen to use your card. This is your second card, so you'll have no more cards for the rest of the evening, isn't it? Yep, okay. The question, I brought the wrong piece of paper. There it is. Question remains, climate change is a problem we will be dealing with more and more. What can be done in regards to building sustainably with climate change in mind?
Thank you. I have to say, I'm very proud of Gibsons Council and the town of Gibson as a whole. We are leaders in asset management, both natural asset and non-neft infrastructure. I think Gibsons has really been innovating in using the natural asset to support infrastructure like our ponds, to support stormwater management. We have done incredible work to mitigate impacts of climate change and adapt. I can start list. We created a Gospel Rock Conservation Area. We supported the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. We just approved update of DPA2, which is our environmental development area, which regulates how you can build and manage the area. We have done eelgrass restoration, which is very important as a carbon sink and habitat for various fisheries. We have had ongoing partnership with the Nicholas Sontag Marine Center. We have project Coastal Resilient Project, which is about creating resilience on our coast. Source to Sea Project, which is understanding how our watershed behaves and feeds our aquifer. We have working collectively, even as a Sunshine Coast level, regional level, in water governance, which is crucial. We need to protect our watershed.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. I know it's terrible. We can chat about it later. You will have a chance to have a meet and greet with all the people here after. Next question was to Blake. You put up your card, right? Okay. Climate change is a problem we will be dealing with more and more. What can be done in regards to building sustainably with climate change in mind?
So this feeds into or ties in with the cost of housing. From a perspective of a former construction guy, we've been following the step code process of the 1, 2, 3 phase of the step code, the energy step code, as it affects the building code. And we're about to enter into phase 3. And at each stage, it sends a shiver through the industry. The shift from first to second phase infected the door and window industry, and it pushed a whole bunch of small businesses out of the industry. And that, I'm not saying that was necessarily a bad thing, but it allowed the industry to respond quickly to increase energy efficiency of homes and commercial properties. The cost of that, other than social, is measurable, and there are dozens of examples, maybe even hundreds of examples of every time an R value of a wall is increased, a new technology is introduced, there's a retraining involved, and it affects the community, it affects jobs, and so on. Environmental preservation also does that. So when you put restrictions on industry, which I agree have to be done, it puts the costs up, and it takes a while for the industry and the economy to adapt to that. So what can be done is the question. Well, we're doing it. We're doing it gradually. Adaptation is cultural and societal as well as adapting to climate change.
No, I forgot this again. To you, David. Climate change is a problem we will be dealing with more and more. What can be done in regards to building sustainably with climate change in mind? And I remind you that's your second card. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'm going to commend Councillor D'Andretti because she mentioned most of the high points of what's happening in this community. And, Gibsons is to be credited for the proactive things that have been done using natural assets for stormwater management. When we experienced the atmospheric river last November, all our neighbors had washouts and flooding. We, knock on wood, our system worked. Gibsons was recognized, a presentation was done by our staff for the COP26 from Gibsons to Glasgow, and world recognition of what's being done in this community. Our CAO traveled to South Africa to, again, speak on natural asset management. Conservation, we've gone from close to 900 liters of water consumed per capita per day to under 300. It's proactive things like this that we have an aquifer, we're protecting it, And it's one of these things we're working together, but it's something that, we're fortunate. We have some very good staff that have been working with us, but it's still a work in progress. And, we have to be accountable for the things that we do here that impact on people who have no say. Islands in the South Pacific that are vanishing because we're driving fossil fuel cars. We're building houses with huge greenhouse gas emissions. So
Blake has asked to reply to the question again, so we'll give him that opportunity. Climate change is a problem we will be dealing with more and more. What can be done in regards to building sustainably with climate change in mind? Thank you.
So I was listening to myself as I was talking to you. My last time I chose my first my card, I was speaking like a politician, and I was kind of just dodging around it. So I wanted to talk about what I'm doing personally. So I mentioned earlier that I'm on a development permit, and I've taken a more or less not derelict, but badly neglected building right in the downtown core of Gibsons, and I'm investing everything into it. And what I'm required to do, I'm exceeding. So I'm required to put EV charging in, and I'm exceeding that. I'm going to make sure that I've got electricity for every single parking spot in my property, which is 9. To have EV charging. The reason I've got 9 parking spots is because I went for a variance to the town and explained that I want to focus on environmental issues. I'd like a relaxation on parking. The town heard my appeal, and that council, which is this council that we're presently with, they approved it because they realized that that's where the emphasis has to be, and I'm close to transportation and so on. So I'm pre-wired for solar. I didn't have to do that. I've got a pipe going up into the, when I can afford it, I'll do it. I'll put solar on the roof. My color scheme is designed to reflect light and back away from the building, so I don't have to install air conditioning. I'm improving the insulation and so on. There's so many things that a property owner can do to help solve the problem. It's not all up to council, and we need to hear from you on what council can do.
Next question to Mr. Phil Young. Are you in support of a new route or a bypass for the Sunshine Coast? Bypass.
Another route. Another route. Basically, for people they have been here for a long time, they enjoy the quiet life. I am also a retired people. I agree with them. However, as time moves on, we have to say that there must have some kind of development. Development must go on gradually, stage by stage. Therefore, a bypass is needed. However, we have to be very careful to choose the route, the path, and then make sure that our present living environment is unchecked with our own planning to stay with the same kind of living standard as before. I hope that we can have a overall discussion about this in the coming future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. Stafford has asked to use his card. Are you in favor of a bypass across the Sunshine Coast?
Well, of course. This subject makes my blood boil, but only because my experience on council with Modi, it hasn't been a good one. I think for the safety of our citizens, the schools, everybody else, there should be a bypass, and it's incredibly arrogant. And I think that this council has to take an initiative of advocacy with the Ministry of Transportation to get the job done. They did come to the coast. They had all these elaborate plans, and they're useless. They're not going to happen. Plus, they came and asked us a bunch of questions after they cut down half the trees down the highway already. It doesn't make any sense. And all their plans are for the purchase of private property. And everything was environmental impact. I was like, okay, I'm sitting there. I actually left the meeting. I apologized to Emmanuel, our CAO, afterwards for bailing out of the meeting because I was so mad. I couldn't sit there anymore. Environmental impact, you've already cut down all the trees and made a hydro lines. Like I just, it seems so simple, yet they make it so complicated. And I think this council priority is advocacy to these major government bodies that affect our lives without us having any say in it. So yes, of course, I support it.
Next question to Mr. David Kroll. Gibsons is on the precipice of needing a separate RCMP force at a large price tag. How would Gibsons fund this when we reach this point?
Thank you. Well, as most of you know, we dodged the bullet this last February when the statistics came out for our population growth. This council, realizing that we were probably going to be faced with a policing cost, and it is horrendous, we started putting funds aside. There was a budget increase, initially 5%. The first year, the second year, it was going to be another 5%. We reduced it to 2% because of COVID. This past year, it was 3%. We've also petitioned the province to ask that rather than when you hit 5,000, because the reality is if you hit 5,000 in February, your policing costs start in April. There's currently, as it exists. So what we've done is we've petitioned the province. We brought a resolution to UBCM that policing be scaled into communities, that you don't get whacked with the full blow out of the gate. But it is something that they're not just going to say, oh yeah, we agree with you, let's do that. But the entire province, we're not the only community faced with this problem. So we're working together to try and solve it so we don't get hit with a 30% tax increase overnight. And that's a reality. It would be about a 30% tax increase.
Thank you, David. All right, next question from Mr. Stafford Lumley. Gibsons has remained lucky in consideration to the rest of the coast on the water topic. What is long-term solutions for making sure Gibsons residents remain watered?
Well, there's one big one. The town, in its wisdom, has done as much as it can regarding its natural asset policy, and obviously we led the way in metering water, which immediately saved the town over 54% of its water use by metering. I think the next step, and Anne-Marie alluded to part of it, but the next step is to work with the SCRD, Squamish Nation, and the SCCA, which is the Sunshine Coast Conserve Association. We have to start working on a plan, and again, be vigilant and advocate for the perseverance, the saving of our aquifer recharge area, which is on Mount Elphinstone, which, as you know, there's logging going on up there. And also, we have to develop some working relationships with the Sunshine Coast Regional District, because, as you know, there's a new development process because it's affordable of trailer parks. Nothing against someone living in a trailer park, but they're also up on Mount Elphinstone. We just have to work with the SRD to kind of plan this area out. And I think it could be done, but we got to work hard at it.
Thank you, Stafford. Desmond has chosen to use his card, so the question remains, Gibsons has remained lucky as far as the Sunshine Coast on the water topic. What is the long-term solutions for making sure Gibsons residents remain watered?
Okay, first thing is that we currently have a license to withdraw water which will support 5,400 people. At 4,800 with all the development permits and building permits in place right now, we're already at that number. We immediately must put an application in to Flinrod, which is the provincial government, and apply for an increase in our water license. Once we know we can go past 5,400 and they say, yes, you can withdraw 8,000, enough water for 8,000 people from the aquifer for the community, we can then plan on developing to 8,000 people. But right now, we are basically out of water at 5,400. We have a big problem with infrastructure. We're leaking water in, I can tell you, 4 or 5 different places. We're not investing in that. We're wasting a lot of our resources. personally, I have 10,000 litres of water that I every year off my roof. I have a large lot, a large garden. It lasts us in the summer when it was brutally hot. We had water left over, and that was watering every day. So, I mean, first of all, we must conserve water, but we must have a clear and transparent understanding that there's 95 wells on the aquifer from Elphinstone down to here, and aquifers are drying up and down the west coast all the time. We have to take it seriously, and we must know how much water we can take out of that before we continue this headlong density process and just keep handing out permits without knowing if we're even going to have enough water and infrastructure to deliver them.
Thank you, Desmond. Oh, Silas? That was your second card. Yep. I was waiting for somebody to do that. I knew that was going to happen. I love it. Awesome. All right, Silas, same question to you. Gibsons has remained lucky as far as the Sunshine Coast on the water topic. What is the long-term solutions for making sure Gibsons residents remained watered?
Well, I think it's far more than luck. As Councillor Lumley explained, there has been a lot of work going into responsible water sustainability and stewardship in Gibsons going back several terms now, going back decades, and successive councils, successive staffs have done tremendous work on making that happen. And it's culminating in this natural assets strategy that's getting national attention for the work that Gibsons is doing. I do appreciate the concern I'm hearing about Gibsons perhaps not having enough water now, but I think there's a bit of confusion there in that under the new Water Sustainability Act, you actually cannot apply for, the province has responsibilities too. They don't just give out permits willy-nilly to either governments or other people who want water, who want to exceed their population or exceed a number by far, for 8,000, for 10,000. We can only apply for basically our current population. It's just like when we had to apply for provincial funding to build a new school, they would only give it for our current population. So when the time comes that we will actually have more population, we'll apply for a renewal of the license, and I'm 100% confident we'll get it because our stewardship in this province is second to none.
All right, well, that concludes the economic or the infrastructure segment of this evening. Now we'll get into cultural and social issues. We'll start with Mr. Silas White. What does reconciliation mean to you?
Thank you. This touches this is a very deep topic for me as someone who grew up on the Sunshine Coast and has had relationships with people in the Sechelt Nation, especially, building relationships very strongly with people from the Squamish Nation as well. Even just on the weekend, I connected with the spokesperson of the Council of the Squamish Nation. It was a great connection. And that's what I've learned about the approach to reconciliation. It's individual relationship building is so integral to making this work. It's what I worked on at the Sunshine Coast Regional District when I was a director there, connecting with the Sechelt Nation, having regular meetings, going for breakfast with the chief. I did that at the school board for 9 years, and those personal relationships really cannot be replaced by a lot of language about promises, about consultation, about reconciliation, about decolonization. They're popular words, but what we really need is to make those connections, also make space for the Indigenous peoples to speak for themselves. I think that is not happening enough right now, and it's what I also do as a publisher in publishing Indigenous voices, which I've done for the last 20 years. Thanks.
Perfect. Mr. Leslie Thompson, what does reconciliation mean to you?
Thank you. Thanks, Silas. I would agree with you where it's important to carry on a relationship with the indigenous people. One of the main reasons is our watershed. I know the town administration department is continuing that conversation with the indigenous people because the watershed actually, they have the final say on that. There's a lot of things where we have to communicate with each other. We have to talk to each other. We have to bring people to the table, the different stakeholders. It's important to have that communication going. Mental health, nobody's touched on yet, but that is a big thing. Depression is a big thing. I know there is a member on council standing for election that has a big problem with that. We need to help that person. We need to look after the people that have issues, whether it be indigenous or whether it be the local community. Everybody needs to be heard about. Everybody needs to be spoken to. And as council, I think it will be my ambition to listen to you and come to a conclusion, both measurable, both accountable. And if something goes wrong, I take responsibility because I am standing for mayor, and I think it's only fair that if something goes wrong, I say it. I've really made a mistake, and let's rectify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks, Keith.
Good, thank you.
All right. Next question to Mr. Desmond Delaney. How do you plan to involve young and lower income residents in the decision-making process of Gibsons?
I think it's up to them, but we have to create a welcoming situation for them, and we also perhaps had to reach out a little bit more as they get older into grades 11 and 12, as a elected council representative, perhaps once a month going and meeting with the school and having discussions with them and listening to them about things that are going on in their community, and especially if you're an older person, sharing your life with them and creating a connection with them where they feel comfortable to get involved. I came from an era where at the age of 18, you had to decide to register whether to go to Vietnam or not, even down in New Zealand and Australia, and that made adults very fast. And this generation at 18, a lot of them still are sort of trying to figure stuff out. So I think, the more that we can bridge the gap, make them feel welcome, make them feel like they have a voice and have an opinion outside of social media, which really isn't the best, medium for them, just to be able to have face-to-face and involve them in things like, planting programs, just generally bringing them into the community and just understanding what a special place we live in.
Thank you, Desmond.
Next question to Mr. Stafford Lumley. Would you support establishment of safe and ethical therapeutic mushroom dispensaries as other communities have done?
Okay. I may have done mushrooms in the past. And I felt better. Yeah, I did. I think that's about all I know about therapeutic mushrooms. I've not looked into it, done anything. I would support one thing that I've read and heard and people have discussed is the fact that they help with like people with depression, and maybe which may lead to the higher cases of mental illness. And I think you have to be open to everything to be able to help somebody, whatever it may be. We've certainly embraced a cannabis distiller, like cannabis, what would you call them? Stores? I don't know. I don't go into them, so if they had mushrooms, maybe I would. But yeah, I mean, I if it helps, why wouldn't we support it? It's open discussion. It would be among council and among the public. I mean, that's what you'd have to eventually listen to as well as engage with the public. And if everybody's on board, I would support it. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Stafford.
Bob would like to answer. Would you support the establishment of safe and ethical therapeutic mushroom dispensaries as other communities have done?
Well, first of all, I was wondering who's going to get that question, given that it was the longest question on our sheet. Not that I'm familiar at all with psilocybin mushrooms or, in fact, the kind of therapy that takes place with them, but I think it's important to understand that the way this therapy is done is that the experience of taking psilocybin is guided by what is supposed to be a very well-trained individual. So in other words, you don't do it alone, you do it with someone else. And what's really important is how well-trained that someone else is. If we're going to license these kinds of facilities in Gibsons, I think it's absolutely imperative that we have some way of determining whether the people that are doing the work really know what they're doing. Because without having good, qualified people doing it, I'm afraid you could have a problem. So, yes, I support it as long as the people that are operating it are well trained.
As luck would have it, the next question will be to you, Bob Morris. Is the health and well-being of a community the responsibility of the federal, provincial, or municipalities, or is it the nonprofit sector?
The health and well-being of an entire community? My goodness. I think probably the health and welfare of any community is a combination. Each level of government has its own area of responsibility, and I would think that that area of responsibility is not necessarily equally shared among them, because I believe in terms of medical, the provincial government is probably more responsible than anything else. But certainly the municipality, in what it does to support recreational opportunities, to support lifestyle. I think realistically all three are as responsible. Did I answer your question? Oh, all right. That's it.
Thank you, Bob. All right, and this is the final question for the cultural and social issues category and the conclusion of our debate. Mr. Blake McLeod, do you support the expansion of supportive housing? And if yes, how would that look in Gibsons?
Question for me. Yeah. So I have been an advocate for the low barrier supportive housing facility on School Road, a fierce advocate for that. And as it was alluded to earlier, there was a lot of pushback in the community. But what I found from that was that it really drew the community together. And I found that a lot of, and we're talking about on social media, because a lot of that happened during the pandemic. But I find that when a community comes together on these sorts of issues, I'm just really inspired by it. We get into it, man. We do. Like and it can even get nasty. But really rarely do the trolls come out. You know, like it's just people in the community expressing themselves. A lot of it's fear-based and so on. And information comes. There's a tremendous amount of people dedicated, a number of people dedicated to just digging in, finding out where like Portugal came up a lot. Portugal has done incredible things it's the model for the globe. What they've done with low barrier housing, and it's the housing first model that we're talking about here. So that no matter what your story is, no matter how broken you are, how much we don't require that you stop using drugs to be housed. Incredibly important in a compassionate community like ours. I don't know that Gibsons needs another supportive housing, low barrier supportive housing facility right now. I know that there was a lot of focus at the time on focus for other vulnerable populations, single moms, for instance, or single parents, why don't we call them. So as a council, we're going to have to just look at it as it comes up.
Thank you, Blake. Thank you, everybody. That was great. Thank you for your inclusion and showing up here tonight. That's really cool. And municipal democracy means a lot. General voting day will be on Saturday, October the 15th. Advanced voting days will start Wednesday, October the 5th and Wednesday, October the 12th. All of this occurring at the Gibsons and Area Community Center. There are also a new expanded eligibility for vote by mail. So if you want to vote by mail, you have to have your vote by mail ballot package together or it starts getting distributed on September 30th, and then you have to have it off and received by the Chief Elections Officer on Saturday, October the 15th. If you want more information than that, see me after this. And the candidates will be together coming out to have a chat, meet and greet time for you.
Mr. Chair, I think we have closing statements about to happen.
Oh, I totally messed up again. One job. All right, I started on that end last time, so I'll start on this end this time. Bob, you have 1 minute.
Oh, that much?
Yeah.
Again, I'd like to thank all of you for coming out tonight. I think it's absolutely imperative that we stay, that you stay involved in what's going on in the community, and that we, as a council, remain transparent and make it as easy as possible for all of you to have access to what's going on and know what's going on. My feeling is that in the past, probably council hasn't been, I wouldn't say not forthcoming, but I would say that it was difficult to get information from them. I think we have to change that. I look forward to what happens on October 15th, and please get out and vote.
So I've been waiting to use this line. I love living here. Like, seriously, it's just amazing. And I think pretty much everybody in this room would agree. It's an incredible place to live, especially what we just went through in the pandemic. I can't imagine a better place. I've traveled a lot. I can't imagine a better place to have spent the pandemic than right here. And we had so much space, so much, but more than that, it's just how engaged the community is. This is a really seriously active, engaged community. Like, we get into it. I said it before. We really get into it. And we have platforms to do that where we don't even have to sit across from each other. I think I'd like to see that change. I'd like to see more of it actually in the room with each other. And I find people really change when they're off social media. There's just this sort of, it's like when you're, it's like road rage, you know, when you're in your car, you're a different person. It's the same on social media, although I've grown so much, spending time just listening, you know, whatever. There's just so much has happened in the last, since I moved here in 2016. And I just want to celebrate with all of you that we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming out. And if you can encourage somebody to come out to the next one, I guess there'll probably be another one. That'd be great. The more the merrier. That'd be better to get everyone's message out. I'd like to thank everybody on the panel here that took the time to come up and answer these questions. It can be a little nerve-wracking, I know, from the past, but yeah, and thank you guys for running the show. I think you did an awesome job. And yeah, I don't have much more to say. I would like to make it clear to everybody, though, when I said the mushroom thing, I'm not on mushrooms right now, okay? So just to be clarified.
I'd just like, we touched on it earlier, but I think something terrible happened in the community in the last month or two when 91 letters went out to mostly women in this community who earn their living with a home-based business providing tourist accommodation. They were told they had to bring $1,500 into the town of Gibsons by the end of next week. It is not refundable. They may get around to issuing a temporary use permit, maybe not. And then after that, they have to pay $2,000 and another $2,000. I think we really messed up there. You know, it's this not what we are as a council. That's not what people are elected to. They don't sit here in front of everybody and somebody thinks somebody could just come out and yank my living away from me. And, you know, it's something that it should be fixed immediately. It should never have happened. It wasn't based on any credible evidence, and it's not a good thing, I think, that this council should walk away from. Thanks.
Thank you. I think this business of municipal municipal government, it's tough because we abide to legislations from higher levels. But one of our biggest role is really to understand what's going on in our community and listen to people's concern. And this means meaningful engagement, right? Listening in a meaningful way. It's not just listening and going home and don't thinking about it. It's really taking each point and making sure that we can translate this in action, have discussion in council, and translate this in good policies. So I think this current council has focused really. We are not perfect. We were not perfect, but I think we did very decent. We put as our first core objective in our strategic planning, increase community engagement, and I would like to continue to do that. And this is my commitment to my community if I am reelected. One of them.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I think, we're all aware we've got issues in the community. Dialogue is really important, and sadly COVID sort of put a wrinkle in the fabric of that life. We started off, we were doing community dialogues on neutral territory. We were using High Beam Dreams or other locations and having community engagement on topics, which was incredibly valuable. A Zoom meeting is pretty impersonal when you're sitting in your living room, sort of watching this little postage stamp head thinking, what are they talking about? It's difficult, but dialogue is important, feedback is important. Bylaws aren't perfect, but the bylaw, it was felt we needed a bylaw. Maybe it is a bit too hard, but it's better to put it out hard and dial it back than put it out weak and keep having to push it forward. So, bylaws aren't cast in stone. They're words on paper. Don't forget to vote.
Okay, let me finish my opening speech, okay? I stayed in Hong Kong for 33 years, and then stay in Vancouver another 33 years, okay? And right now, I'm planning to stay here another 33 years, okay? Altogether 100. I will be a citizen of Gibsons forever. I have to complete my family. With my wife Debbie, okay, she's working in care home. And I have 3 children. Older son, 28 years old, graduate from UBC, is a civil engineer. And second boy is 26, a boy, also as a geologist from UBC. And I'm lucky, I got number 3, boy or girl? Girl, yes! Girl! She is the best of the 3 children. She told me that she will take care of father and mother forever.
So I'm trying. So I would like definitely to start to thank the chamber and to Keith, Michael, and Bob for your technical assistance tonight for putting this on. And I'd like to thank all of you for attending. I've had a break from council for the last 4 years, and in that time, it's been restorative, it's been educational, and I've learned a lot about health. I've learned a lot about humility. And I'm ready now to ensure our next 4 years are transformative, innovative, and positive. I've got the experience, the energy, the education to guide our community through overlapping crises, especially when it comes to advocating for more support from our senior levels of government. With the crises we're facing, we can't continue the way we always have. We need to focus on the issues that matter to people: ferries, healthcare, housing, and climate change. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. It's nice to sit down in front of you and express what our thinking and views are. I appreciate it. Again, there is a few things that's on my mind that I'm going to promise to work for you rather than for myself or anybody else. It is the community that always stands first, and I can promise you the council that will be elected will also do the same. Vision, dialogue, prosperity, looking after the water problems that we have, looking after the developers that are trying to expand properties out here. There's a lot of development permit on the table that we can expedite to make it happen. Affordable housing. I know the city of Victoria has fast-tracked affordable housing. I'm open to that. And ferries, we've got a lot of frustrations. I will be willing to sit down with the top notch on the ferry and help them to help us all. Thank you again, and please go and vote. It'll be an appreciation by all of us on the table out here. Also, thanks to the Indigenous people and the Squamish Nation. Thank you. Thanks, Keith.
Once again, thank you all for coming. And thank you guys too. I know it's stressful, so thank you very much. So once again, voting days are Wednesday, October the 15th or Saturday, October the 15th is the general voting day. Wednesday, October the 5th and Wednesday, October the 12th are the advanced voting days. And if you do want a mail-in ballot, you can just head on to the town of Gibsons Municipal Hall, and they will be able to help you out. So the candidates have said that they will give open if you guys would like to ask them any questions face to face, and that time starts now. So thank you very much for attending, and thank you, Gibsons Chamber of Commerce, for hosting us.